We've heard a lot lately about the debt limit, the debt ceiling. Well, tonight, what the national debt really is and how it possibly affects you and your family. Let's begin, though, with the difference between the national debt and the deficit.
Deficits have been cut by 2/3.
It's now a familiar line for President Obama when talking about the U.S. economy.
And by the way, our deficits are down. Cut them by 2/3. I want to repeat this because the public apparently never believes it. Since I took office, we've cut our deficits by 2/3. The deficit has not been going up. It has been coming down precipitously.
Technically, that is true. The deficits, the annual shortfall when expenditures exceed the revenue coming in, have been dropping since historic highs in 2009 after the economic collapse.
What President Obama is crowing about is that the near-term deficit has been reduced, so that means the annual change in how much you owe, it's still getting worse, but it's not getting worse as fast as it was at the beginning of his term. And it's a very, very weak thing to point at. The fact is that the total debt is the thing that economists know that has a significant economic impact.
So when the president says this,
there's almost no measure by which we're not better off than when I took office and then when we started this process for change.
That is not the case when you look at the national debt clock, gaining more than $10,000 every second, adding almost $8 trillion since President Obama took office January 20th, 2009.
The national debt is growing, and growing quickly. According to the Congressional Budget Office, the total debt for the end of this year will be $18.5 trillion. Now, interest rates are unusually low, historically low. If interest rates were to rise just a few percentage points, the debt will rise to $20.5 trillion in 2018, then $23.5 trillion in 2021, to finally a whopping $26.9 trillion in 2025. Now, this is just with interest rates rising 3% over 10 years.
You just take the size of the debt, which is, trillions of dollars, kind of hard for people to imagine, and you say, well, how difficult would it be to service that debt, to pay the interest? And so the debt, of course, is what the government has borrowed, and they need to pay interest on that to the people who lent to them. That interest is affected by the interest rate, so the higher the interest rates, the more they have to pay, the more spending there is in terms of interest payments.
The U.S. pays a huge amount every year on interest on the national debt, just interest alone. Now, at the current interest rates, which are historically low, the U.S. will pay $229 billion in just interest at the end of this year. In 2018, if interest rates rise, as we mentioned, the payment will be $405 billion. In 2021, it rises to $590 billion, and in 2025, the interest payment balloons to $808 billion, more than the country pays for the U.S. military budget. That means over the next 10 years, the U.S. could pay a total of $5.5 trillion in interest alone. Now, if interest rates go up any more than 3% over the 10 years, these payments could explode.
So what does that mean for you?
If we don't get ahead of the curve on this debt problem, then we're going to be doomed to grow about 1% a year slower than we're used to. And that slow growth is going to feed through to the bottom line. You're going to have low wage growth, and you're going to be much more at risk to lose your job.
Congressman and Honorable Paul Ryan.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
What can change the country's debt trajectory? Newly minted House Speaker Paul Ryan has talked about slowing the growth of future entitlement spending.
We will not duck the tough issues. We will take them head on.
It's actually very straightforward from an economics perspective. You got to control the future growth of entitlement spending. That's Social Security, that's Medicare, Medicaid. All these programs are expected to grow very rapidly in the future. All we need to do is to control their growth, not cut them, just to control their growth, so it's about the same as the economy is growing.
There have been a lot of attempts to go after the Bowles-Simpson Commission had a plan to go after the big debt. But the fact is that it's not rocket science. It's something that Bret, you and I could sit down and we could solve it over on a napkin in a couple of hours.
It definitely hasn't proven to be that easy politically. We always seem one election away from tackling the big debt issues. And even in the Republican Party, there is a major split about how to deal with reform.
This is a matter not of math. This is a matter of morality. If this country does not keep its promise to seniors, then what promise can this country hope to be trusted to keep? And the fact is, none of them.
The only way we're going to be moral, the only way we're going to keep our promise to seniors is start by following the first rule we should all follow, which is to look at them, treat them like adults, and tell them the truth. It isn't their money anymore, Mike. They stole it. It got stolen from them.